Hey guys, Chad here with Happy Going Games, and today we have something special. We have Tanner Lear. He just recently top-8ed Star City Games Atlanta with this deck, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a deck tech today with him. He's going to explain to us why he chose to play this deck over other decks, what made him feel comfortable, what cards he liked and what cards he didn't like, and what he would change going forward. So Tanner, what do you think?
Hey, the basic reason to play this deck with Star City Games Open Atlanta was that it's a brand new format. You have Gate Crash, which is a brand new set that just got released, and so everybody's going to be trying different cards, and so the usual thing that will happen whenever you have a new format is that most people will tend to play aggro decks. Aggro decks are very aggressive, and it's pretty difficult to build a control deck with all sorts of different answers when you don't know what threats you're trying to answer yet. So the cool thing about this deck is it's kind of like a control deck, the blue-eye-red flash deck, but it's a little bit more tempo-oriented and a little bit more card advantage-based. And so card advantage, in most cases, is usually pretty good, so we don't really need to worry about exactly which threat as long as we have answers to most threats. So we'll start right here. You have your 10 main deck spot removal spells. You have 3 Pillar of Flames, 3 Searing Spears, and 4 Azorius Charms. I played the deck for a while, and we started with 4 Pillar of Flame, 4 Searing Spear, 4 Azorius Charm, and there was lots of matches where those spells are very good, like your mono-red, the red-green decks, the Jund aggro decks, things like that. But then whenever you get to the mid-range decks, like the Naya and Jund, or the control decks, like the Esper Control, these spells start to lose a little bit. So we cut one of the Pillar of Flames and one of the Searing Spears. We left all 4 Azorius Charms, because Azorius Charm can cycle in your control matchups, or the mid-range matchups, so that this spell is almost always good. These two have their spots where they're better, but they also have spots where they're worse. So that's why we have those 10. Then you move to the 12 creatures right here. Now, Restoration Angel, Augur Bolus, and Snapcaster Mage are all essentially usually 2-for-1s. Your Augur Bolus can hit you a ton of different spells, so you have a whole toolbox in your deck. You've got your Snapcaster Mage. Again, you have so many different spells that you can flash back, so that it gives you a second spell, so you get a 2-for-1 off that guy. And your Restoration Angel, being able to blink either of these is insane, but even the fact that you can just flash him in as a blocker, you can usually eat most creatures in the format, most 3/3s, 2/2s, things like that. So your creatures give you an insane amount of card advantage, and that's usually how you're going to win most of the games as well. And then you have these spells. So basically the big thing that was happening was we were talking about if we wanted to play Sphinx's Revelation or Aurelia's Fury. If you play Aurelia's Fury, you're playing more of the deck with Geist-Sustained Traps in the main deck and Boros Charms, and you're more of an aggressive strategy. But I wanted to do something that I've been doing, which is Sphinx's Revelationing. And so after you cast a spell, you're usually going to win the game because you're normally drawing far more cards than your opponent. Most aggro decks that aren't playing it can't catch up at that point. So we have 3 of that guy. We've got 2 Think Twice to be able to hit our land drops on time, and give us another 2-for-1. We've got our different counterspells that we're playing. And so whenever you look at most of these deck lists, you don't want to think about these as you're playing 3 1-ofs, but you're playing 3 copies of the same spell that are all slightly tweaked. So you have 1 Rewind, which is awesome in the mid-game fights when you can counter a spell and then flash in a Restoration Angel to block your guy. It gives you this huge tempo swing. You have an Izzet Charms, extremely versatile. You can kill a creature on the early turns that's going to attack you. You can counter a Sphinx's Revelation that your opponent's casting if they don't play around it. And then you can also sift through extra lands. After you draw 6 cards of your Sphinx's Revelation, if you draw 4 lands and 2 spells, and one of them is an Izzet Charm, you can draw an extra 2 cards and maybe pitch a couple lands that you don't need. And then your Counterflux is just insane against all the control decks. When they're planning on resolving their spell with more lands than you, when they have Farseeks and things like that, you can Counterflux their Sphinx's Revelation even if they have 5 mana still open. So we move up to these guys right here, and these are basically the slots that are kind of interchangeable in most of these strategies. So I'm playing 2 Supreme Verdicts in the main deck. The big thing on that guy was a lot of the aggressive decks, playing like Boros Reckoner and things like that, and all the Naya Humans decks. This card's pretty good against all of them. It's absolutely insane. And then against the Bant control decks and things like that, or the Jund and Naya mid-range, all of those decks, it's pretty good. After dealing with Drag Tusk or anything like that, you can Searing Spear with Supreme Verdicts to kind of be able to handle most of their threats. The Tension Spear was basically a concession to Boros Reckoner. Instead of playing either the 4th Searing Spear or Pillar of Flame, it doesn't deal damage, so it kind of keeps you alive. And then these are 2 of our main win conditions. So you have Jace Memory Adept against all of the mid-range and control decks. just being able to mill them 10 a few times after you get to a good position in the game. Or Counterspells Reaver. Basically, I played him in the main deck because I thought there was going to be a good portion of the mid-range decks in addition to the aggro decks. So if your opponent has Frag Tusk, Beast Token, and you slam Counterspells Reaver, they can't even deal you any damage right now. So it's one of those things that like you just want to get to a position where you can resolve this spell and you're no longer in a spot where you can lose. And so those are your two big guys right there. And then down here in the lands, you have 22 duels. We added the 2 Sacred Foundries from Gatecrash, and then we have 2 islands, and we have our 1 Moorland Haunt. Now your Moorland Haunt really helps the deck because it is an attrition-based deck, so a lot of times after you've kind of gone through all your creatures, traded off your Snapcaster Mages, things like that, they kill your Resto Angels, you can still play your Moorland Haunt, maybe make 2 or 3 dudes and just kill them over time. And so your 1 Moorland Haunt's pretty good, doesn't really hurt the mana base too bad. The big thing on Sacred Foundry, as opposed to playing extra base planes like the deck used to, was the fact that we were playing a counterflux, but we're also playing Supreme Verdict. So we definitely want our reds and our whites. The Pillar Flames and things like that on turn 1 are really important, but double white on Supreme Verdict is also kind of tricky when you're playing some Sulfur Falls and Steam Vents and things like that. So we added the 2 Sacred Foundries. I liked them a lot. If the format shifted to just 100% aggro decks, probably more basic lands would be pretty good, just because we don't want to shock ourselves out. They're definitely not free. But in the mid-range kind of fights that I thought I was going to be winning, I thought the Sacred Foundries were necessary. And
is there anything else you would change from Gatecrash after the tournament, or is this?
The only things I played around with was changing the Detention Sphere and things like that to Mizium Mortars. If there was more Loxodon Smiters and things of that nature, I thought Mizium Mortars was pretty good. And you can also hit it off Augur instead of Detention Sphere. But if there's more Boros Reckoners and things like that in the format, then I still like Detention Sphere. So overall, I haven't seen the Gatecrash cards that I'm absolutely in love with that I wanted to change to. But I'm always open for new ideas.
We should take a look at the sideboard.
Alright, so let's check out the sideboard. So, against your control matchups, you have 1 Dispel, perfect for countering their counterspells or their Sphinx's Revelations and things of that nature. We've got 1 Negate, again, basically serving the same function as your Dispel, but it can also hit their Planeswalkers as well if they're trying to resolve their own Jace Memory Adepts and things of that nature. You have 1 extra Counterflux. Like I said before, basically the reason you would play this deck over any of just the blue-white Geist decks and things of that nature, you have your 3 Pillar Flame, your 3 Sing Spear, but Counterflux is like the biggest blowout against all the control decks. Another reason to play red was your Izzet Staticasters. These cards are insane against your Nigh Humans matchup. All their actions, Pilgrims, their Thalias, things like that. This card just flashes in and kills. Your Geist Sand Traps are awesome against all the other control decks and also in the mirror. It's another way to deal with Geist Sand Trap, just legend ruling, but it's also really good if you play your own Geist Sand Trap and they don't have one. You have 2 more Jace Memory Adepts. Your Jaces coming against the control and mid-range decks as your primary win condition. 2 more Supreme Verdicts against any of the hyper-aggressive decks, or if the banned enchantments deck continue to be a thing, it's your only way to deal with Invisible Stalker. We had 1 Oblivion Ring to board in, similar to Detention Sphere, but it can hit your opponent's Detention Spheres. So if you like resolve Jace Memory Adept and they Detention Sphere it, you Oblivion Ring their Detention Sphere, you get your Jace back, things like that. And then 1 more Counterspells Reaver as the Naya mid-range and Jed mid-range decks, because Ultimate Price doesn't kill it, and usually you have another creature to their Devour Flesh. So this card just comes into play, and it's usually pretty difficult for them to deal with. So that's your sideboard right now. I've definitely been playing with adding Mizium Mortars to the deck. It seems like it's pretty good, and it's kind of popping up more and more as we go along. So I definitely think I might want to try to find a spot for it. But as of right now, this is the deck that we played in Atlanta.
Alright guys, thanks for watching. Thanks to Tanner for showing us his deck, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. So we'll see you next time.